Think about a single mistake. On a battlefield, it could get you killed. And at quiet office, it could steal a decade of your life. We're going to look at two stories separated by 100 years, but they're both linked by one powerful idea: the absolutely devastating impact of one single error, whether it comes from an artillery shell or just a keyboard. Can you imagine scribbling those words on a tiny scrap of paper? It's your last hope, and the whole world is just exploding around you. This wasn't some message for the enemy. No, this was a desperate, frantic plea to your own side. This one sentence, it just captures one of the most terrifying moments of the First World War. Okay, so now let's jump forward almost 100 years. The battlefield looks completely different. The weapons have changed. But that idea, a system turning on its own people, yeah, that's still around. We're going from the deafening roar of cannons to the silent, invisible stroke of a key. So let's start with a modern soldier, Captain Jim Dillinger. His story doesn't have any trenches or carrier pigeons. Instead, it's about a quiet, bureaucratic mistake, a typo, that sent him into a war he was never, ever supposed to fight. Just look at this timeline. In April 1999, Jim Dillinger's military obligation was done, over. He was a civilian. But somewhere, deep in a database, a single keystroke changed everything. His discharge date wasn't listed as 1999, it was listed as 2010. And because of that one tiny typo, 5 years later, he gets a letter recalling him and sending him to Iraq to hunt for roadside bombs. Right, so you're probably wondering, how on earth does something like this even happen? Well, when Dillinger was recalled, they told him it was because of the stop-loss program. And he said, that explanation didn't really make total sense, but he accepted it. He'd been in the Army a long time, and when they tell you something, you believe it. He trusted the system. Now just hold that thought. Let's rewind to a time when trust was pretty much all soldiers had. We're going all the way back to 1918, the final brutal push of World War I in the Argonne Forest in France. And this is where the legend of the Lost Battalion was literally forged in mud and fire. So picture this, 554 American soldiers. They pushed deep into the forest, following their orders perfectly. The problem was the units on their sides hadn't. They were pushed back. And suddenly, these 554 men were basically an island in a sea of German forces. They were completely cut off, totally trapped. And just when you think their situation couldn't possibly get any worse, it did. A deafening artillery barrage started raining down right on their position. And then this terrifying realization spreads through the men. The shells, they weren't German. They were American. Their own side was trying to destroy them. With no radio, no way to communicate, their fate rested on a hero that nobody could have predicted. A carrier pigeon named Cher Ami, which is French for dear friend. And this, right here, is where the history of what happened becomes a legend. Cher Ami was their last bird, their last shot. As she took off with that desperate message, the Germans just opened fire. She was hit and she fell, but then somehow she struggled back into the air. Blinded in one eye, with a bullet in her chest and her leg just mangled, she flew 25 miles in 25 minutes. She delivered the message and the friendly fire stopped. 194 survivors owed their lives to this single wounded bird. It's an almost unbelievable story of valor. But okay, let's just pump the brakes on the heroics for a second. To really get what happened, you need to understand this term, probable error. It's the cold, statistical language of artillery. What it means is, even if you have perfect coordinates, shells don't all land on a single point. They land in a zone. Half of all the shells land in the center of that zone. The other half, well, they fall outside of it. So what does that mean? It's basically a science of calculated inaccuracy. And that science is the absolute key to understanding the truth behind this legend. Because as heroic and amazing as Charmy's flight was, what if that's not the whole story? What if that's not what really stopped that barrage? The legend is incredibly powerful, but the actual historical record, well, it tells a very different story. While Cherami was still flying, an American artillery spotter, a lieutenant named Leon Hattemer, was watching the whole thing through his binoculars, and he realized the shells were landing on the wrong slope of the ravine. He got on a field telephone, called in the correction, and the shelling stopped. His call went through just minutes before Cherami arrived, bleeding but triumphant. The hero wasn't a bird. It was a man on a phone. And this is just a perfect example of the power of a good story. right? The men in that ravine, the survivors, they never knew about Lieutenant Hattemer's phone call. All they knew was that they were in hell, they sent their last bird, and then the shelling stopped. They needed a miracle, and for them, Cher Ami was that miracle. And they carried that belief with them for the rest of their lives. So now we have two stories where the official record was just wrong. In 1918, you had this heroic myth that kind of papered over a simple procedural correction. And for Jim Dillinger, the story in his file was a flat-out mistake. So that brings us back to the modern battlefield, the one that's fought with paperwork. What do you do when the system gets your story wrong? For a soldier like Captain Dillinger, the battle doesn't always end when they come home. Sometimes the biggest fight is with paperwork. The enemy isn't a person, it's a mistake in a file, and your weapons are these very official procedures designed to correct the record. You basically have three main tools in this fight. Think of it like a toolkit. The Privacy Act Amendment, that's like a scalpel. It's for making precise fixes to objective mistakes, like Dillinger's discharge date. Then you've got the Discharge Review Board, which is for more complex arguments, like if you want to challenge the reason you were discharged. And finally, there's the Board for Correction, and that's like the court of last resort, designed to fix pretty much any other error or injustice. So for Dillinger's specific case, the path forward is the Privacy Act. The process itself is actually pretty methodical. First, you pinpoint the exact mistake. Then you gather your proof, like his original contract. And then you file a formal request. It's a precise, bureaucratic solution to a mistake that had such incredibly chaotic consequences. And that's exactly what Dillinger did. He fought the bureaucracy, the Army eventually found the typo, and his discharge papers were finally corrected. But listen to what he says here. It really gets to the heart of it all. Even though he's proud of his service, that pride is always going to be haunted by one simple fact. He should never have been there at all. And that leaves us with this final thought, this big question. Whether it's a misplaced artillery shell that accidentally creates a legend, or a misplaced digit that sends a man to war, a single mistake can just echo through history. It really makes you wonder, how many other stories out there, both heroic and tragic, are built on a foundation we can't even see, just a simple human error?